In Hollywood, beauty can be both a weapon and a wound. It opens doors, wins hearts, and builds empires. But it also invites envy, obsession, and ruin. The same spotlight that anoints a star can burn her alive. Fame demands perfection. Yet behind the flawless smiles and silver screens, desire and doubt quietly wage war. In a world built on illusion, one wrong choice, one betrayal, one headline can turn applause into exile. These women once ruled the stage and screen. They had talent, promise, and everything to lose. Tonight, we step into the rise and collapse of 10 actresses who seemed untouchable until Hollywood decided they were no longer its favorites. A world of light and the shadows it refuses to see. Number 1. Lindsay Lohan, the star who fell from her own spotlight. For a moment she was untouchable, a child prodigy who became Hollywood's golden girl. Lindsay Lohan embodied charm, confidence, and raw talent. From The Parent Trap to Mean Girls, she wasn't acting, she was alive on screen. But fame arrived too early, and too fast. The parties, the flashbulbs, the whispers, they became louder than her own voice. As she grew, so did the scrutiny. The same cameras that once celebrated her now waited for her to fall. Every late night, every stumble became an opportunity for headlines. What had been adoration turned into appetite, a public hunger to watch a young woman unravel. After Mean Girls made her the face of a generation, studios lined up with offers. But behind the success, exhaustion and pressure began to take hold. The industry that built her had no patience for imperfection. Missed sets, courtroom appearances, and rehab stays became her unwanted sequel. The audience that once cheered began to judge. Still, flashes of brilliance broke through, in smaller films, in fleeting performances that reminded the world of what she once was. But the damage was done. The machine had moved on, chasing new faces to mold and discard. Lindsay Lohan's tragedy wasn't failure. It was how quickly triumph turned to target. In Hollywood, even the brightest lights fade fastest when they burn too soon. Number 2. Megan Fox, the beauty Hollywood tried to erase. She was the face of a generation, fierce, magnetic, unforgettable. When Megan Fox burst into the frame of Transformers, she didn't just act, she detonated. But in a world that feared outspoken women, her honesty became her undoing. When she called out sexism on set, Hollywood turned its cameras away. Fox's rise was meteoric. Her mix of defiance and allure made her the poster child of modern celebrity. Yet beneath the surface, she was navigating an industry built on control, one that worshipped her image but dismissed her voice. When she criticized the toxic culture behind the lens, her words were twisted, exaggerated, weaponized. Suddenly she wasn't the star, she was the problem. The fallout was swift. She was dropped from the Transformers franchise, blacklisted by major studios, and branded as difficult. The same directors who once praised her beauty now called her ungrateful. For years, she disappeared, not from lack of talent, but from a system unwilling to forgive a woman who refused submission. When she returned, it wasn't with vengeance, but with clarity. Fox began reclaiming her narrative, speaking openly about misogyny and survival. Her story became less about loss and more about endurance. Megan Fox didn't fade, she was erased. And in her silence, Hollywood revealed just how fragile its power could be. Number 3. Winona Ryder, the darling who stole more than hearts. Once, she was America's indie muse, fragile, intelligent, and endlessly fascinating. From Heathers to Edward Scissorhands, Winona Ryder was more than a star. She was a symbol of 1990s rebellion. Then, in a quiet Beverly Hills store, everything changed. A moment of impulse, a shoplifting arrest, and the narrative flipped overnight. The world that once adored her turned cold. Cameras captured her humiliation, tabloids devoured her fall, and studios quietly stepped back. For years, she vanished from the spotlight, her name reduced to a punchline in late-night monologues. But the truth was never simple. Ryder's arrest was less about theft and more about fragility, the unraveling of someone who had lived too long under scrutiny, worn thin by the pressure to stay perfect, adored, and endlessly dissected. Behind the headlines, she spoke softly of exhaustion, anxiety, and the weight of expectation. Fame had made her a character in her own life, beloved by millions, yet profoundly alone. And when she stumbled, Hollywood didn't help her up. It watched in silence, fascinated by her fall. Years later, her return in Stranger Things reignited what had never truly died: her quiet brilliance, her mystery, and her resilience. Winona Ryder's story isn't about a fall from grace. It's about how grace endures, even after the world forgets. Number 4. Sharon Stone, the icon who was punished for desire. She burned through the screen with basic instinct, confidence weaponized, sexuality transformed into power. But that power came with a curse. Sharon Stone became too provocative for the system that had created her. When she demanded control, Hollywood answered with silence. Stone's ascent was revolutionary. In the early 1990s, she redefined female power on screen: sharp, magnetic, unapologetic. But Hollywood was never kind to women who owned their desire. The very role that made her immortal also marked her as dangerous. Instead of celebration, she was typecast, diminished, and quietly exiled, punished for being too commanding in a world that demanded obedience. When she fought for meaningful roles, producers withdrew. When she spoke against exploitation, she was labeled difficult. Even after a near-fatal brain hemorrhage years later, her resilience was met with indifference. The industry she helped shape had moved on to younger, quieter faces, pretending she had never changed its image forever, a silent erasure that spoke volumes. Yet Sharon Stone never surrendered her identity. She rebuilt her career not through scandal but through endurance, writing, speaking, mentoring, and reclaiming her story on her own terms. Her survival became her protest. Hollywood once used her image to sell desire. Today, her defiance reminds us that survival is its own art form. Number 5. Tatum O'Neal, the child star who lost her childhood. Twice. She held an Oscar before she could drive. Tatum O'Neal was born into fame, molded by it, and ultimately destroyed by it. Her childhood was written by adults chasing their own dreams, her adulthood shadowed by addiction and fractured family ties. The applause faded long before she found her own peace. Her story began in the shadow of her father, Ryan O'Neal, Hollywood royalty with his own turbulence. Together, they were a picture of golden success, but behind the smiles were years of conflict and control. Tatum's Oscar win for Paper Moon made her the youngest Academy Award winner in history. Yet, it also trapped her in an identity she could never outgrow. As she matured, the industry that once adored her had no room for her complexity. The work slowed, the attention dimmed, and loneliness filled the silence. Addiction followed, creeping into the spaces fame left behind. Her strained relationship with her father became a spectacle of its own, love entwined with pain. Through memoirs and candid interviews, O'Neal revealed what fame had cost, not just innocence, but the right to grow up quietly. Still, her survival speaks louder than her scandals. Tatum O'Neal's life is not only a cautionary tale, it's a testament to endurance. She didn't lose her light. She learned how to live without the stage. Number 6. Mischa Barton, the girl who couldn't escape the screen. For a generation, the OC defined youth, glamour, and heartbreak, and Mischa Barton was its fragile heart. But when the cameras stopped, the industry turned cold. Tabloids devoured her, mental health struggles deepened, and the fame that once lifted her became an anchor she couldn't carry. Barton's rise was meteoric. As Marissa Cooper, she became a cultural phenomenon, the face of early 2000s adolescence, equal parts dream and disaster. Yet off-screen, she struggled to hold on to herself. The sudden exposure, the scrutiny, and the expectations of perfection eroded her sense of safety and identity. When she left the show at its height, rumors swirled: arrogance, instability, rebellion. Few paused to consider exhaustion. Hollywood quickly moved on, labeling her difficult before she could defend herself. The tabloids followed her descent with ruthless fascination. Breakdowns, hospitalizations, legal battles. Privacy ceased to exist, and empathy was nowhere to be found. Years later, Barton would speak out about the pressures she faced: exploitation, manipulation, and the emotional toll of being watched since adolescence. Her story reflected the darker truth of celebrity culture, that it consumes what it creates and forgets what it destroys. Mischa Barton didn't fall from fame. She was pushed by its weight. Her story is a reminder that behind every glossy image lies a soul fighting to stay whole. Number 7. Sienna Miller, the scandal that stole the spotlight. She had it all: grace, beauty, the promise of stardom. But Hollywood has never forgiven women for public heartbreak. When her private life became tabloid sport, her talent was eclipsed by scandal. Sienna Miller became a headline before she ever had the chance to be a legend. Her career began with promise: Alfie, Factory Girl, Layer Cake, films that showcased a natural, magnetic presence. But her romance with Jude Law became the industry's favorite obsession. When betrayal entered the story, the media erupted. Every glance, every tear, every silence became fuel for entertainment. Miller found herself trapped in a narrative she didn't write. Casting directors hesitated. Audiences judged her not by her craft, but by her heartbreak. The intrusion grew unbearable, her life dissected in print and online. She withdrew, seeking refuge in theatre, in small productions where her work could breathe again. Years later, her performances in American Sniper, The Lost City of Z, and The Girl reminded the world of her depth and range. She returned not as a cautionary tale, but as proof that dignity can outlast shame. Sienna Miller's downfall was never about talent, it was about a culture that profits from women's pain, and her quiet resilience remains the most powerful act of all. Number 8. Anne Heche, the outsider who defied Hollywood's rules. She was fearless, unpredictable, creative, raw. But when Anne Heche's personal life collided with Hollywood's prejudice, the system recoiled. Her decision to love openly, at a time when few dared, cost her roles, contracts, and years of silence. She never stopped creating, but the gates of the industry stayed half closed. In the late 1990s, Heche stood at the edge of superstardom. With acclaimed performances in Donnie Brasco, 6 Days, 7 Nights, and Wag the Dog, she had become one of Hollywood's most promising leading women. But when she began a public relationship with Ellen DeGeneres, a cultural storm erupted. The same producers who once celebrated her suddenly withdrew, unwilling to cast a woman who had defied the unwritten rules of image and conformity. Heche spoke often about how quickly the phone stopped ringing, how opportunities vanished overnight. What followed were years of reinvention, independent films, stage work, and creative projects far from the spotlight. Through it all, her spirit remained unbroken, her performances brimming with honesty and chaos in equal measure. In time, audiences began to see what Hollywood had missed, a talent uncontained by approval. Anne Heche lived on her own terms, and in doing so, paid the price for courage. Her legacy reminds us that truth, once spoken aloud, cannot be silenced. Number 9. Rose McGowan, the rebel who burned the stage down. She wasn't ruined by scandal, she was silenced by power. Rose McGowan's fall wasn't an accident, it was retaliation. When she spoke out against Hollywood's darkest secrets, the system fought back. But in losing her career, she gained something greater, her voice, unfiltered and unafraid. McGowan's early career was marked by bold choices. From Scream to Jawbreaker, she embodied the sharp, rebellious edge of 1990s cinema. But behind the glamour, she carried a secret, one that would later ignite a movement. When she revealed her assault by one of Hollywood's most powerful producers, the cost was immediate. Roles disappeared, publicists withdrew, studios labeled her unstable. But silence was never her language. Instead, McGowan turned her exile into resistance. She became one of the first and fiercest voices of the Me Too movement, forcing an industry built on silence to confront its crimes. Her activism was raw, unfiltered, often uncomfortable, precisely because it was true. Hollywood tried to erase her, but she became impossible to ignore. Though the screen no longer called, her influence reshaped it forever. Rose McGowan's story isn't one of ruin, it's one of revolution. In losing her career, she found something more enduring than fame: freedom, truth, and her unbreakable fire. Number 10. Judy Garland, the star Hollywood, built and then broke. She sang, she danced, she dreamed, and Hollywood owned every part of her. From The Wizard of Oz to endless studio contracts, Judy Garland lived under control, her childhood stolen for profit. Pills kept her awake, pills put her to sleep, and when she faltered, the machine simply replaced her. In the end, the girl who made the world believe in magic was undone by the cost of being perfect. Garland's journey was a paradox, dazzling and devastating. MGM molded her from childhood, monitoring her weight, her appearance, even her emotions. Applause became her validation, exhaustion her constant companion. Her voice could move the world, yet behind it lay loneliness few could comprehend. As she grew older, the pressures only deepened. Failed marriages, financial ruin, and relentless scrutiny became her reality. Still, she performed, every note trembling with pain and brilliance. The world adored her, even as she unraveled before its eyes, unable to escape the spotlight that both made and destroyed her. In 1969, her body finally gave out. But death did not end her story. Garland became immortal, a symbol of both the beauty and cruelty of the Hollywood dream. Judy Garland's tragedy was not that she was fragile, but that she was expected never to be. She taught the world that even broken voices can still sing, and sometimes that's enough. Fame can crown, but it can also consume. For every dazzling rise, there's a shadow the spotlight can't touch, a place where applause fades and truth waits in silence. These women were not simply stories of ruin, but reflections of how fragile power becomes when the world stops listening. Their downfalls weren't only about mistakes or scandals, they were about humanity. The pressure to stay perfect, the cost of being seen, the pain of being forgotten. Yet through it all, their names endure, not as cautionary tales, but as echoes of courage, complexity, and survival. If their journeys moved you, leave a like to honor their strength. Share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to hear more stories that look beyond the fame. Because even fallen stars still light the dark.